Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artist Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier with another episode of the Artists Index Infos podcast. And we are adding another guest to the list. This guest is very, very interesting for several reasons. You'll find out why. But before we move on and reveal why they are so interesting, I'll let them introduce themselves and spell their names for you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me and inviting me. My name is Sheila Oliveira, and that's spelled Sheila And I'm used to doing that because there's so many vowels in my name that my email always gets screwed up. So
I can totally understand that. Plus, as you were saying that, I was thinking, okay, well, we all know that Rhode Island has more spellings of Lisa than any other state in the Union. But I'm wondering if Sheila comes in as a close second.
Well, Oliveira does.
Yeah, Olivier, Olive. I mean, they just, it's amazing.
Goes on and on and on. Yeah.
Yeah. There's always somewhat of a backstory. So, boy, your career is wide and varied. So let's start off with let's begin at the beguine, as the old song goes from Brigadoon. That's right. The old Broadway musical Brigadoon. Begin at the beguine. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess I can start off in my early years where I really became interested in color and the combination of juxtapositioning colors and creating these wonderful designs. So I think my first influence was as a dressmaker. I worked as a summer gig as a stitcher in a dress manufacturing company. And my particular job was sitting at a sewing machine and taking a bundle of pre-cut fabric and sewing the major seams together. And we're going back to the time of the 1960s, where the influence of those large blocks of color were dominant in the fashion industry. So oftentimes they were like asymmetrical color blocks. And I just thought that was wonderful and fun. And that really kind of sparked my interest in art, really. And I had another really big influence too. I had an uncle that was worked with Chrysler Corporation, and he traveled all over the world. And he would often send us gifts of art from different parts of the world to my parents, of course, and then later on to me directly. So I started to collect all this amazing international artwork. And he spoke, several languages fluently. And he traveled and lived in Africa. He lived in the UK, Australia, Peru, so on. So I had a wide visual understanding of the different cultural differences in the art world. Mm-hmm. So those were probably my two greatest influences and beginning interest in art.
I mean, we've had people who have these, these milestone moments or key moments or out of the blue moments or, back into childhood. If something just clicks in their head and they say, I want to be an artist. And the journey is, the beginnings are different, but the journey is pretty much the same. Did you go to art school or did you go to, more of a comprehensive kind of a situation? And
well, I did. I went to art school. I didn't in high school because they really didn't offer that. way back then. Now, of course, there are alternative, paths in education. But when I went to school, that was not the case. And so I always sketched and drew and became very interested in fabric, as I said, because that's what I learned to sew very, very early. And then got married and, had a child very early. So, like a lot of people, got kind of caught in the path of having to, support a family and, make a living. So I worked in a hospital for about 12 years and as a administrative secretary, which really taught me a lot of other kinds of skills like organization. Because I had to attend these meetings and take the minutes for the meetings. And so it taught me a lot of skills in that regard, which really helped me later on. When I was in my 30s, I went back to college and I got first an associate's degree in art, then later a bachelor's degree in fine art. And I concluded with my master's degree, which is the terminal degree in our field.
Mm-hmm. The art education you received, how would you describe it? All these years later.
I think it was life affirming for me because I think many of us as artists are, I don't know, kind of on the outside looking in. You don't really feel as though you fit into the economy-driven society. You could be more reflective. You could be more intuitive. So those things really don't lend themselves to the, general, real world. And when you go to art school, I think you find a lot of people who are similar to you. And I really loved that. I loved the fact that I was included. I felt included even as an older student, because, I was with people who were a decade or so younger. But that didn't bother them, and it didn't bother me. It was just a wonderful experience overall. And it was really life affirming and certainly career affirming because I knew I belonged there.
What was one of the fondest memories you had of undergraduate and then graduate school?
Well, there were so many. Probably the experience of going to, when you're in art school, you take life drawing, you take, color theory, design, so many, learning so many different forms, printmaking. I enjoyed that very, very much, just because I hadn't had that exposure before. And I think that the professors I had were very supportive of me, in my work. I think they recognized my strong work ethic, as I said, from, having a previous life as an administrative secretary. I kind of carried that work ethic into my art making. So, my assignments were always on time. And, I always tried my best to complete what I was supposed to do. So, that was kind of all positive. Aha moments were probably in the photo lab. And I had a wonderful professor who has passed, but she was pretty famous, Elaine Fisher. I don't know if you had the pleasure.
Yes, Elaine came in after or during the transition of Ted Mead, who was there when I was there. Ted Mead was the head of the department. In fact, I think he was the department of photography. Yeah.
Okay, so you met her. And
I met her, yes. Yeah.
She had a very, very strong personality.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And, had a clear idea of aesthetic, photographic aesthetic history. And I really fell in love with the whole idea of record history, recorded history, the role that photography had in assimilating, what was happening, particularly in the United States at that time, recording, reaching out through photography. And I, at home, always had, as a child, Life magazine, which at that time brought you, the best in black and white photography. So that was kind of like, really reinforcing some of the visual experience I had looking at those images and how they impacted me. And now I was able to go and create these images myself. I mean, let's put it that way, begin my own journey in photography.
Yeah, I mean, those are the days of, darkroom finesse, dodging, burning. It was technical, and yet there was such it was like, to me, it was an artistic discipline. It was kind of, it was a hybrid between science and art, because you had to have that technical skill in the darkroom for sure. I mean, one screw up and a whole roll of film would evaporate on you. And of course, you spend a lot of time in the dark. When
and along with the spiders.
Oh yeah. Having done my stint in advertising back in the old days of stack cameras, and I swear they put some of these stack cameras in places where I still remember the one at the University of Miami between the rats and the cockroaches. It was just,
that was pretty scary. I agree.
Yeah. You always had to do that. But there is that thing about photography that there's an immediacy to it, and I've known a lot of photographers. A personal friend of the family, his dad and my dad were roommates at one time. John Robson has this. I think the photographers developed this uncanny sixth sense of seeing the action, seeing the captured image just before it's captured. It's a sense of timing, because I mean, 1 millisecond off and you lose it. I mean, people who try to photograph sunsets, they think, I'll just go down the beach and I'll take a couple of shots. It's not always successful. I mean, you have to be, well, to use that sort of new age term, you have to be present.
You have to be present. Yeah. In the moment. Yeah, I agree with all of that. But my particular, I think, journey in photography was really more about the psychological effects of studio photography. And I just loved that. I loved the relationship of having someone in the studio, and we would create kind of a narrative within the studio. So it sometimes lasted all day, and it was like a real close relationship for that one day, which we never had it after that. Mm-hmm. But it was recorded. So whatever they wanted to be in that day, in my, photography studio, they were. Mm-hmm. And, I had some amazing results, for me. It was really a gift to have that experience with people. And I really enjoyed that. And then, of course, later on, when you use your photography skill, in terms of commercially, I didn't enjoy that as much, but I did enjoy it. I was a wedding photographer for at least 12 years. And, I enjoyed that aspect too. But my favorite moments were when I had someone in the studio and, we're doing that kind of work with them.
So how did you transition from being a studio photographer? Or are you still, you're running both sides of the tracks. I mean, you're a painter, you're a graphic designer. So tell us all of these skill sets that you have.
Yeah. Well, I don't do the kind of photography that I did 15 to 20 years ago. And, of course, I was teaching at UMass all this time. So I started teaching analog probably for, I don't know, maybe 8 years there as adjunct faculty. And I taught a lot of classes. I would teach photo 1, photo 2, which were analog, and 3, I believe, was also analog. And then somewhere along that process of working there, we switched over to digital. And Elaine and I were the first people to offer the digital, photography class. That was a real learning curve, but it served, I guess, as a new experience for me, which, I enjoyed the learning part of it, but the other part of it was that it no longer was a true art form for me. It became something else. It became more of a technical skill, which, so the art part of it for me wasn't as attractive. I mean, I can't speak for someone who has only known digital photography, but I can only speak for someone who, first began in analog film, large format. I had the best cameras, I had the best lenses, and prided myself on that. Oh boy, right. I've got this really nice Hasselblad, and I have a Leica, that nonsense, but it really wasn't nonsense to me. It was like having this beautiful equipment so you could produce beautiful prints. And when that went away, kind of the joy of my artistic journey in photography really was, it changed for me. Mm-hmm. So I kind of moved on, as we all do. I evolved into other things. You did a lot of, graphic design, as I'm sure you know, and continue to do that. But also I, started painting and really, started doing that all the time. So that was kind of my trajectory, if you will.
No, analog photography, as with a lot of other analog things, are coming back. It's making a comeback just as vinyl made a comeback, which,
which I know. Yeah, I get it totally.
People smacking themselves in the head going, I got rid of my Led Zeppelin albums.
Too bad.
It's like, geez, because I remember when it was time to get rid of mine, I think I was lucky to get 50 cents per album. And then I'm seeing some of the prices that they're getting now. It's like, oh my goodness. Because the demand, skyrocketed. There's a whole generation that, we always leap backwards.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that, these things are coming back. And I think it is because there's a certain integrity to, handwork creations that really involve your time, your spirit, your heart, your judgment, your discernment, which can all be fluid in the process, right, as opposed to some of the digital work you might create. And I'm not against that. It's just that I personally really enjoyed being in a dark room and the nuance of the print, the contrast level, the timing, the size, the equipment that you used, the paper that you used, the toning that came after. Right.
Well, there was a lot of knowledge that had to go in there. It wasn't just point and shoot, which some of the, to use the term, old timers still get grouchy about it because it's just point and shoot. Any idiot can point and shoot, and I can understand that. A photographer, traditional photographer, analog photographer's point of view on that, as an abstract painter or an abstract painter in transition, because I haven't given it up completely. But people ask me, one of the reasons why I gave up the abstract, and I'm doing, to borrow from Philip Guston, socially conscious expressionism. And I said, well, one of the reasons was, it wasn't until after I made a decision to change over, was, and it sounds trite and it sounds elitist, but it became a form, abstract art became a form of therapy. Anybody can do it. It's fun. You know, you throw things on a canvas and see what happens. And it's like, no. Imagine practicing medicine that way. Imagine practicing photography that way. And, you know, and I can understand better, you know, from the traditional photographer standpoint, that it's like, you have no idea what you're doing. And which is absolutely correct. So the end product seems to be completely detached from process. It's just a matter of happenstance.
Yeah.
You know, like 100 monkeys on typewriters kind of. Yeah.
You know, initially when I would do a design, I would spend a lot of time, you know, putting together elements. And now when I do a design, like I'm doing something for my granddaughter now, which she wants to start her own little jewelry business. All I have to do is go on an application and play with it for about 2 minutes. And I have these really, you know, very colorful, attractive, eye-catching designs that take me 2 or 3 minutes. So my investment, apart from my having discernment of, you know, taste, if you will, and use that word, isn't a lot. You know, I just kind of can pop 20 out designs and see which one works for the client. And they inevitably will pick something that really is attractive to them. So I make where I would spend probably an hour, 2, 3 creating a design, you know, a few years ago. Now I can do 20 in a half hour and, you know, looks pretty good. So I perfectly well understand the popularization of art. Is it good? Is it bad? You know, I think it makes a lot of people feel included and you know, it's a great craft, if you will, to spend an afternoon with friends and create these works of fun. But as you pointed out, there's not a lot that goes into, you know, most people don't understand really the history and color theory and composition and things that are secondary, of course, in understanding to you and I at this point. You know, we've been artists a long time. So it's quick for us, but it's happenstance for most people. You know, when they hit a high note with great color or composition, I'm not sure it could be repeated, you know. So that was, I don't know if it's good or bad. You know, I just, I don't know if you can really put it in any kind of category. I just know it's changed, you know.
Yeah, although, I mean, the one thing I do have to admit, there are people who have always wanted to be in the arts, but because, you know, there was some adult in their life that said, put that down, that's for children, you've got to grow up, you'll never make any money, you're going to starve, you know, the whole litany. But there are people who I have seen who consciously have no idea what they're doing.
Oh, yeah.
But it is so innate. And I hate the word talent. I don't even want to get into that. It's a whole podcast.
I don't use that word either. So we agree on that. Yeah.
It's innate. It's a form of communication, if you want to just boil it down to a simple denominator. And it's like, yeah, wow. And then with the success, and usually the success at those early stages of somebody who started late in life doing that, it's the praise that they're getting. And then they say, oh, well, you know, I didn't go to school for this. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. No, you know, and then there was a period of time not too long ago where, you know, people like that were shunned. And then just as quickly, it was like, that was a badge of courage. Oh, they didn't spend thousands of dollars to go to school. They just did it, you know.
You were a lawyer first, or a doctor
or
first.
stockbroker, exactly. Yeah. Well, my late father-in-law started off as an art student. He was told, no, you know, you're not gonna. It's going to be really difficult. So he went into practice, but he continued to be a sculptor all of his life. Which was, you know, he had a studio every place that they lived, you know, which was kind of cool.
Yeah.
The other thing too is, you know, Jerry Saltz now is my new hero. And he wrote what is now a seminal piece, How to Be an Artist. And his newest book is Art is Life. This is a man with no plan. He started off as an artist himself. He pursued it for a couple of decades. You know, he was like us, a child or an adolescent of the 70s, 60s and 70s, and just floated around and gave it his all, and then realized, what the hell am I doing? And fell into, with no direction, with no encouragement, fell into being an art critic. So all of his art background was very, very important. It's like, you know, you have these food critics who go about judging other people's cooking, yet they can't, you know, to use the old trope, they can't boil water. And I really find that a lot of his writing has been quite helpful for me, and you know, because we go through transitions like it seems like every other week, you know. But one of the things that he was talking about, which was interesting because it went parallel to one of the reasons why I left. Not only are all these people doing it because it's therapeutic or it's so much fun, but those people, I know I thought I'd be using that term, but those people flooded the market. And we're talking the legitimate market, to the point where he has two terms that come to mind. One of them is crapstraction.
Oh, I like that.
And the other one is painturbation. and
those are good.
Yeah, those are really good. And you know, and how everything has become so bland and so on and so forth. And but when it comes down to it, it is fun being an artist. That's for sure. Now, one of the things, as we move on, the paintings that you had done, you hit this, I don't even want to call it a stride, but a period perhaps where you started doing historic personages of the South Coast.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, it was kind of an accidental thing where I was part of a group of artists who were asked to do a commission for a local tavern. And I was talking with the person who curated it, and we decided together to look up all the people in New Bedford that had some history in New Bedford, because the person who wanted the pieces, it was for a New Bedford eatery. Long story short, we batted around a lot of names, you know, and so we fell upon the one that really was most interesting to me, which was Henry Martyn Robert. And why he was interesting to me was because, as I told you earlier, I was an executive secretary. Now, the name Robert's Rules of Order was from this man who, 300 years ago or so, was attending a meeting at the First Baptist Church in New Bedford that went on for like 14 hours or so, maybe longer, who knows. But this man became completely frustrated with the fact that there was no parliamentary procedure for meetings. So he wrote Robert's Rules of Order. So when I learned that, I said, I'm in. So what I did was a large-scale painting of him. And then I moved on to a few others of from New Bedford that are in the same place. And that was really the beginning of, and it really felt right for me because, as a photographer, looking back at the influence that photography made in, our cultural, record, all over the world. I mean, I'm not just saying the United States, but all over the world, what photography was able to record in a much different way than painting. So that really kind of felt like a really comfortable place for me to take this historical person, honor him by creating this really kind of pop art steampunk portrait. And that was the style that I chose to make it contemporary. And, it really worked. So, I continued on and did quite a few of those portraits, ending up with a series I did for Fall River. So I went from New Bedford and I did, 3 or 4 pieces for New Bedford. And then struck a relationship with Jim Lopes of the Fall River Heritage State Park.
Yeah.
And, we talked and he said, I would love to see, some people from Fall River, some portraiture, historic portraiture. And he was, involved at the time with the Pecasset tribe from Fall River. And he asked me to do Weedamo. So I did. And I did a series, and probably the most well-known of the group that I did for Fall River is the Joe Rapoza one. So I don't know if you know who Joe Rapoza.
This tune is going through my head right now.
That's Sesame Street.
Exactly.
He was the man.
Yeah.
Wrote, all those songs that we, know. And he was from Fall River.
Yep.
And he became world famous. And so I did this large scale painting it's kind of a portrait in my, style, which is very contemporary, and with all the Muppets. And that, was acquired by the Fall River Library. And I did another one for the Fall River Library, which is, I can't think of her name now. But the first Black woman to teach in the Fall River school system,
Yes.
Anna Lewis.
Yes. Yep.
Sarah Anna Lewis.
Yeah.
So her portrait and Joe Rapoza's, I donated because I received a grant to do those portraits. I donated to the children's portion of the Fall River Public Library, where they're on permanent exhibition now.
I mean, they have an excellent collection there.
They do, yeah.
And one of the great characters who's been a guest on this podcast is Dave Mello.
He's wonderful.
He really is.
Wonderful.
He really is something else. Now, are you going to continue on? Because I really think that's something needed. In fact, it could almost be like a giant-sized coffee table book, because there are so many. I mean, you can talk about. Let me roll back a little bit. I knew Milt George ever since I was a kid. He and my father were friends. In fact, Milt and SEA, Southeastern Advertising Agency in New Bedford. My father, that was one of my father's clients. And when I saw Milt's office, I was like, oh my God, I don't care what this man does, but I want to do whatever he does to have an office like his. It was like an adult playland. He had all kinds of stuff. He had a musket, he had all kinds of things. And then Gus Lestady was my next door neighbor when we were still renting in the city. I believe he owned Scotty Travel. And he was a very, very interesting man, and also a friend of Milt's. And in the Times building in New Bedford, we wanted to create something called, and maybe it's something that could be resurrected. We could talk about it at another point in time, the Hall of Firsts.
I like that.
Because Milt was a traveling history book, but from a different perspective. And, just the under the heading flag, American flag, New Bedford gets so many firsts. the first maritime vessel to fly the American flag was from New Bedford. The first school to fly an American flag and become the standard was the Green Street School in New Bedford. Mr. Theodore, I can't remember his first name. He was my neighbor. He lived on Willis Street when I lived on Willis and Prospect. He got an amendment, ratification of some sort, that the American flag could be displayed at night as long as it was lit. So that was just in the flag category alone. And then it goes, and he wrote this little book afterwards before he passed away called I Didn't Know That. But Gus thought it was a great idea if we could construct these banners. And you would have been perfect for it because, to do the graphics of these personages and have them hanging in the atrium of the Times.
Don't get me excited.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great idea because, it's something, again, it's like you're getting a little culture, you're getting a little history, but it's low-keyed, low impact. It's self-discovery because, you're just hanging around and looking up and like, oh, I didn't know that. And then, of course, somewhere there's got to be a key, like a display that has a legend or a key that, you see the numbers on all the banners, and then you can go and refer to them. And then, of course, the magic of the internet now, have it hyperlinked or you do the QR code or whatever, and you can get more information on this. I think it would be a fantastic program. Cool.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something we ought to adopt for the Artist Index.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. And going back to history, just this week, I ran across something with one of my dear instructors. This man, it was Tonieri, Eliot, Cummings, and McCoy, the four fathers, as we referred to them, that were the guys who really, we still get together, the BFA class of 75. We formed a little group called Techum, which is the first, initial of their last name. Their reach was phenomenal, and their impact on us was absolutely phenomenal. But I Googled Tonieri because one of the things that I, in preparing for grants for this program, this project, this is officially called the Artist Index website project. We're going for nonprofit status, so obviously that'll, be altered a bit. But the whole precept from the very beginning was to document as many contemporary parentheses living artists as possible. Contemporary is one of those terms like modern. People get very confused with that. Yeah, they don't understand what that means. And then I just discovered that writing this grant that there should really be three categories. Before it used to be contemporary and historical. Historical was, in parentheses, dead. But I discovered there's a missing category. It's a transient category, and it's posthumous. So recently dead. I feel all of a sudden Billy Crystal from The Princess Bride is like kind of dead, mostly dead,
sort
of dead, yeah. But so we have that transitional thing for the people who departed within the last, say, I don't know, say 25 years. It seems to work for classic cars and then slipping over to antique is 50, right? So then anybody with having passed more than 50 years ago would now go into the historical thing, because I really, believe that this is so important to just like you with Robert's Rules of Order.
That was so weird.
and there are so many weird things from this area. I mean, the connection of this area to other parts of the country and the world are just absolutely phenomenal. It was almost like a hub in so many different ways. But I found the WPA article in the Fall River Herald,
huge,
which I would like to go into a bit further. Sure. Not now, but we'll talk about it now. But I mean, again, it's a project because there was. I mean, I was a recipient of federal funding when I first got out of grad school. My first official job was CETA funded. CETA is CETA,
I remember that.
Comprehensive Employment Training Act. I worked for the legendary Tony Souza at the mayor's office of historic preservation New Bedford City Hall.
Mhm.
And I've always been a history bug, so this really, is more another dose of history. And just give us a little brief overview about the WPA, because there's got to be work behind panels, behind walls.
Oh, there is.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
huge. And I
yeah.
think, okay, well, I'm not a historian, but basically it was a socialist program, social program during the Depression to after the crash, stock market crash. And it was our friend FDR who created programs to help people out of poverty. And again, I'm not a historian, but I do know about the WPA, Works Progress Administration.
Right.
And it was a reach out. He had, I guess, a close friend that was an artist. And, he was influenced by this person who really helped him create a program for, struggling artists. And it was like any other grant program where you had to fill out an application. You had to prove financial, need. And you had to, I guess, prove some kind of artistic proficiency. So, wow, all the people that were involved in that program, I mean, famous people that we never...
Or soon to be famous people, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
As well, right? Yeah,
because they
launched
weren't
them.
right.
It gave them
that at the time, and they were poor.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, it was a program. I don't know how long it lasted. I would say maybe 3 to 4 years at the most. But there were requirements that you had to, fill out this application. They would give you, I don't know, I think it was just like a couple of $1,000s to paint. You had to produce work in order to. It's just like any other grant program. And one of the requirements was that you had to put on the back of the canvas the letters WPA. And that's how you know when something is a canvas from, that particular time period. Now, that wasn't the only art that was created. It wasn't just, canvases. I mean, you had office buildings, particularly post offices and municipal buildings that had large scale murals. And they were all about promoting the work ethic, people at work, people who had jobs, so it was a little bit propaganda sprinkled with a lot of, opportunity for people to, really work artistically and create these wonderful pieces.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if you go online and look up examples of WPA, there are still thousands that exist in public buildings.
Yeah. The program, by the way, lasted from it began in 1935 and it was dissolved in 1943.
Oh, so it lasts a long time.
Yeah, 8 years is a pretty good run, and it did give a voice or a spring pad to artists that became household names.
Yeah.
They
Pollock is one. Yeah.
Yeah, they should really. It should really be. Don Wilkinson always wants people who use the term "they." Please describe who they are.
But anyway, what I love about the whole thing is that, and it's kind of mysterious. So it's got a mystery component to it too. So you've got history and mystery, and where are they?
Right.
Who owns them? Well, the government owns them. So you really can't. You're prohibited to. I guess I don't know if anybody really checks, but if you were to go onto the government website, it will tell you that they own all the WPA works, and they cannot be sold. They cannot be individually owned, and so on and so forth. So there are real, I guess, laws that surround this period of time where that social program was in place.
Wow. And it also kind of like fit into your arc of your arc of professional arc.
Well, I loved them. You know, when I was president and curator at the Fall River Art Association for approximately 10 years, you know, I served in several capacities. And the Fall River Art Association, and again, mystery, because we don't really know, or I didn't know where these paintings came from, but we received, the Art Association did, a collection of approximately 52 paintings from the WPA, that the story goes that they were ready to be discarded from some public building in Boston. And, you know, a friend of a friend, and you know how the stories go, decided to rescue these paintings. And perhaps the Fall River Art Association would be the perfect place for them to be rescued too. So somehow the arrangement was made that they come to the Fall River Art Association, and many of them were just gorgeous, Ron. I mean, you know, to really see these paintings, I mean, they had deteriorated because, you know, many of these paintings were not properly, you know, primed, and, you know, there was not a lot of attention given to the products that were used, the paintings and the mediums and so on. So many of them had deteriorated and were cracked, but they were widely exhibited in Fall River over a number of years.
Yeah. And, you know, what brought me to bringing up Togneri, I always refer to him as Togneri. We're on a conversation with him about the Italian, and he would always be speaking to me in Italian so I could learn more. Which again, he was like my nono, you know, my Italian grandfather. But you said one of his pieces, you know, one of his earliest pieces.
Pieces included in that collection.
Yeah, probably not the best in the world, but he did tell me that, you know, he started off his career as a clarinetist. And during the war, he was in the USO, and somewhere overseas, I believe, there was a bar fight that broke out as they were playing, and he got punched in the face and split his lip, which pretty much put an end to his clarinet playing career.
Yeah, that was it.
But he used his GI Bill to go to art school. So I'm connecting, maybe he had, you know, a start one way and ended up another way, and then went backwards again and ended up being, you know, the developer of acrylic paints in the United States, which is kind of an interesting thing to
sure is. You never know where something will lead. It's an interesting thought. And
so we're gonna start wrapping this up. And as we wrap this up, what do you see in your future? Like, let's break out the tea leaves.
My tea leaves. Well, I'm going to continue. I'd like to do more public art. I really enjoyed the fact that many of my pieces are now part of the community dialogue. So one of my pieces ended up at the Fiske House, which is part of the Underground Railroad. I did Elizabeth Buffum Chace, a portrait of her, and it's in the Fiske House, which just been, you know,
dedicated or marked.
But it's part of the official Underground Railroad, which it was. She was an extremely interesting person. Again, Sarah Anna Lewis was someone I learned about. Love the fact that now people can go and learn about her. So that's an important part of what I see for my future is really, you know, I hate, this is again overdone, community service in a sense that you allow people a visual experience, which could spark them to take their iPhone and scan the QR code.
Yes.
It's kind of a meeting of the latest and greatest with the greatest that was.
Well, the old Paul Harvey radio program, you know, page 2, and that's what the QR code is, you know. And the art walk, the Seaport Art Walk, I think is what it's called, which is ongoing now.
It is.
They've now figured, well, I think in the last couple of manifestations of it, they figured out a way how to show 2-dimensional work, which is almost looks like a vertical file flipper. You know, it goes around, a Rolodex on its side, so to speak, which is kind of cool. I know Pam Haas is one particular person that has a a friend in artists and former instructor at UMass Dartmouth, CVPA. So I think it'd be very cool to have your own art walk with all these famous personages, because my sister-in-law came over from Detroit at the beginning of last month, and she had been here once before. And she remarked that in the time, pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, wow, I loved the city before. It's like even more dynamic now. I mean, where do we go first? What do we do first? You know, that kind of idea.
I know there is really so much to do.
Yeah,
and so much history. And if you care about, and a lot of it is because of the port, the fishing port. A lot of it is, but it just historically drew so many people to Bedford who spent time there and contributed. So thank you for that idea. I would love to see my portraits as banners in some Hall of Fame.
Yeah. We'll have to talk about that. Well, I got to wrap this up, but this has been the most pleasant conversation.
Thank you so much.
I probably would have been better with some either alcohol or caffeine, just because it's convivial, what you do. But we'll probably have to plan for that as well. So, folks, we've been speaking with Sheila Oliveira, a multi-talented. I think she's an icon in her own right in the city, and now in developing that iconness in Fall River as well, which is really, they've been struggling for years to get going or to play catch up. It all depends if you're pessimistic or optimistic. And some of the people, the movers and shakers from New Bedford, went over into Fall River because there was opportunity for them, and it's exploded over there. Patty Rigo, who had been a guest on our show as well, just to name one person. And it's so great to see that this provincialism has stopped. There's a lot of interchange, and art has become, I think, a big industry. Where the money, how much money we make, where does the money go? I have no idea. As Forrest Gump said, the government must have kept that money. I ain't seen a dime.
Me either.
Well, with that in mind, Sheila Oliveira, thank you so much. And folks, that wraps up another episode, and we'll see you on the other side. And whatever you do, just take a deep breath and be kind to each other. That's all we can do. Bye-bye.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.